A response here by a user named Government Patsy. Unfortunately, we have barely any background on the Trenchcoat Mafia's families, but I suspect a serious background investigation would reveal that the core members were drawn from families involved with military, law enforcement, or business, political, and or civic elites, including the evangelical circuit. Similar to this possibly related case, the U.S. Patriot, Volume 2, Number 3, November 1995, page 20. R. Roy Blake first became aware of the satanic intelligence tie while doing research for an article concerning an accidental, in quotations, killing that involved members of a teenage satanic cult in Aurora, Colorado. In that incident, teenagers told Blake that the teenage Satanist who accidentally, in quotations, killed the other teenager had such a mental hold over the other teenagers that they had first told police that an unknown intruder had committed the killing, a story that only broke down when police separated the teenagers for further questioning. In the chaos created by the killing, teenagers told of a ritual site underneath the runways at Stapleton Airport that had seen both animal and human sacrificial ceremonies. The cult, although containing a large number of high school students known officially as stoners, both for their love of heavy metal music and prodigious use of drugs, was not led by teens, but rather by older and apparently respectable pillars of the community drawn from the professions, business community, local government, and the military. As soon as the dust began to settle, however, the teenage sources uncharacteristically refused to talk further, leading Blake to speculate that the cult was once again back in business. So this is a very, very interesting case with this information here from the November 1995 issue. I mean, this is kind of crazy. So to all the coincidence theorists that don't believe this is going on, again, this isn't actually that mind shocking. I mean, a lot of cults that involve teenagers, they are led by older people with ties to the upper echelons of society. This is nothing new. I mean, Ted Gunderson exposed a lot of this a long time ago. I mean, there's still a lot of coincidence theorists and authority worshipping cultists who pretend that that's all nonsense. But I mean, for those that don't know, Ted Gunderson, again, former head of the FBI, nothing to gain, everything to lose. Also involved in the Gosh case, the Johnny Gosh case, who coincidentally reportedly taken to Colorado. If you haven't checked out the Johnny Gosh series, take that out. But continuing the post here, I can say that in addition to Eric Harris, Joe Stair may have had a parent involved with classified military work. Amanda Stair once indicated that their father had served in the Air Force, albeit briefly, before finding employment on Kodiak Island. She couldn't recall what he did there, but one of the largest employers on the island is the sprawling U.S. Coast Guard base, the largest tenant of which is the Coast Guard Air Station. Trenchcoat Mafia member Tad Bowles told investigators that he used to play paintball with Harrison Klebold just north of Sedalia, Colorado, an unincorporated town with a population of less than 200. Wow. And from the files here, this is page 10,656 from the 11K report. Thaddeus Mordecai Bowles, April 30th, 1999 report. Littleton, Colorado, was interviewed by investigator Thomas Wilson, DJTTF, and investigator Frank Vanasak, CBL, on April 22nd, 1999. After being advised of the interviewing investigator's identification, Bowles provided the following information. Bowles obtained his GED in 1998 and was not attending Columbine High School at the time of the shootings. Bowles stated that he was the individual who started the Trenchcoat Mafia group. He claimed to be the first person to wear a duster to school. He thought the group size was now between 20 and 25 people. He had video classes with Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, and also played paintball with them at a field north of Sedalia, Colorado. He said the group even practiced fencing at Chris Morris's house. So that's a curiosity. If you haven't checked out the Johnny Gosh series, actually go into Sedalia and the known cults in that area, as well as high political elite connections, including the Bush family there. So, yeah, a lot of funny business going on in Sedalia, Colorado. Tamara Rumor, page 7098, said she had seen Trenchcoat Mafia associate Brooks Brown visiting a residence in Sedalia, Colorado, specifically to see an older male who was employed at Blackjack Pizza as a delivery driver. This is possibly Phil Duran, but he didn't specify. She offers an unsettling account of Brown's conduct. So this is document 7098. Rumors said that she has known Brooks Brown at Columbine High School since he was a sophomore. She said when she first met him, he was going with a girl who was a student assistant in the attendance office. And she said she was a little upset with him about what was going on in the attendance office. She did not elaborate, but the implication was that Brown and his girlfriend were making out. Rumor recalls that about 2 months prior to the incident, Brown came up to her and made the comment, "I know where you live, and I've seen you riding your horse." She said it unnerved her because nobody knows where I live. She resides in Sedalia, lot number 99 on the attached map. She said she had seen Brown at a residence in Sedalia, which she identified to me on a telephone book map of her development as being lot number 83. The residents at that location, as listed in the telephone book, are R and J E. Rumor describes the specific person which Brown visited as an older male who was employed at Blackjack Pizza as a delivery driver. She did not know anything about the people who lived at this address. Rumor said the encounter had caused her to feel uneasy about Brown. A check of Rapid Start reveals no record of anyone named E, nor is there any record of any other leads involving Sedalia. A check of DMV records reveals the following persons and vehicles at the listed address. So in this public document, she names Ronald and Jerry Edlund, the E's. So do they not exist? So there's no record of any Edlunds there? So these are ghosts, spooks. The government patsy poster continues on here. Who Ronald and Jerry Edlund are, what their significance is, remains unknown. But Sedalia, Colorado is known to be a hotbed for cult activity. Example, the Brotherhood of the White Temple, which has been headquartered there since the end of World War II. The Encyclopedia of Occultism and Parapsychology lists the Brotherhood of the White Temple is a theosophical occult organization founded in 1903 in Denver, Colorado by Maurice Doriel, the religious name of Claude Doggins. A lifelong student of the occult, Doriel claimed to have spent 8 years in Tibet during the 20s. He also claimed to have made contact with the Great White Lodge, the advanced beings who completed their work on Earth and who are now, as masters, guides of the destiny of humankind. Doriel was seen as the agent for the coming Golden Age. Associated with the Brotherhood is the White Temple Church. The Brotherhood was headquartered in Denver for many years, but immediately after World War II, in the atmosphere of anxiety over a possible atomic war, the Brotherhood built a new headquarters complex in Sedalia, Colorado, in a valley surrounded by high mountains. The headquarters were formally moved in 1951. 2 years later, Doriel predicted the coming biblical Battle of Armageddon for later in the year. It did not occur, but members continued to stockpile food and other resources they might need should war break out. The Brotherhood teaches a system of Gnosticism that draws heavily on the Theosophical and Kabbalistic writings. The human soul is pictured as the spark of the divine that has devolved into matter. This experience has overwhelmed the soul, which has lost the harmony it had after being created. Teachings emphasize methods of re-establishing harmony and, with the aid of the masters, returning to the divine realms. New members complete a series of lessons and progress through neophyte and temple grades, which can take 4 to 5 years, after which members are invited into the real inner work of the group. Some of the older members reside at the center in Colorado, but the great majority live around the country and stay in contact through correspondence. The organizations published a periodical, Light on the Path, and a set of booklets written by Dorial called The Little Temple Library. The more than 100 titles in the library cover a broad range of occult topics. This circuit was connected with an interstate criminal network involved with a range of illegal activities, including drugs, arms, child trafficking, pornography, and the production of snuff films, all connected with and protected by elements of CIA and the Defense Department. Government Patsy wrote that after quoting the encyclopedia here. I'm also curious about the ostensibly church-related program under which Robin Anderson was traveling to New York and Washington, D.C. only weeks before the massacre. And about the redacted section of the report. This is document 10,635. When asked who devised the label of Trenchcoat Mafia, Robin Anderson replied that initially she believed that Chris Morris attended a meeting some time ago to represent the Trenchcoat Mafia for their induction into this national organization. Let me read that again for the coincidence theorists. For all the goofs who think that the Trenchcoat... There's still goofs out there who think the Trenchcoat Mafia didn't even exist and it was made up, let alone expanding beyond the halls of Columbine High School. When asked who devised the label of Trenchcoat Mafia, Robin Anderson replied that initially she believed that Chris Morris attended a meeting some time ago to represent the Trenchcoat Mafia for their induction into this national organization. So even if Robin Anderson is mistaken here, what is causing her to say this? She then stated that no one else from Columbine High School attended this national level meeting and that the name Trenchcoat Mafia was just adopted by that group at her school. And then there's a whole bunch of redacted. There's multiple sentences here redacted. Then we have this. She also stated he wears a very dark green colored beret that looks black. She stated that as far as she has been told by Chris Morris, he's the only official member of the Trenchcoat Mafia. And that she feels he looks down on the others since they are not official members. That's actually really curious. So according to Robin Anderson in document 10,635, she's stating here that there's some kind of national organization known as the Trenchcoat Mafia. Chris Morris is officially a member of the national organization, and then all the other members at Columbine are not official members. They're just under the generic label Trenchcoat Mafia. That's really curious, and how does she know this information? Robin Anderson, of course, Dylan Klebold's close friend and date for the prom. Robin Anderson, of course, the one who purchased the shotguns and rifle at the gun show from alleged CIA handlers. It gets a little complicated here, because Mark Maines was a co-worker at Blackjack Pizza. He sold Dylan the Tech DC-9 and went shooting with them at Rampart Range. Philip Duran, who introduced Dylan and Eric to Mark Maines, was in order to make the gun deal. And then Robin Anderson is also involved in the purchase of guns. So we have this circle Mark Maines, Philip Duran, Robin Anderson. Robin Anderson also claiming that there's some kind of national trenchcoat mafia that only Chris Morris is a part of. Why has this not been thoroughly addressed anywhere? I don't know, but this is MINDSHOCK, where we go down every rabbit hole. This is right on official document 10,635. And yet the coincidence theorists probably don't want to address this at all. Now, of course, there's the death education classes, all the occult connections. I mean, this is just flat out insanity. You have Brooks Brown, also in Brooks Brown, Tad Bowles, also connected to Sedalia, Colorado, all the cult activity there. And Robin Anderson connected to some kind of church program, traveling to New York and Washington, D.C. weeks before the shooting. And also claiming Chris Morris is in a national trenchcoat mafia, also being the one to actually purchase weapons for Eric and Dylan from alleged CIA handlers. I mean, this is kind of crazy. Government Patsy also posted this. Document 8,245. All of this is sourced in the documentation. So, coincidence theorists, authority worshipping cultists who hallucinate that this is all made up conspiracy nonsense, it's all in the official documents. I mean, how lazy are the coincidence theorists and the Dunning-Kruger crowd who just dismiss all this as crazy conspiracy? It's all in the official documentation. And we haven't even seen all the redacted documents. If this is in the official release documents, one can only imagine what is contained in the redacted and unreleased documentation. Also worth pointing out here, the men who Robin Anderson purchased one of the guns from were both career Pentagon employees. So again here we have 8,245 submitted by Marcus C. Mott, April 30th, 1999, Phoenix Field Division. Description of activity, report of interview. Synopsis, report of interview with Ron Hartman and Jim Washington at the Federal Bureau of Investigation office located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, April 30th, 1999. Narrative 1. April 30th, 1999. Mr. Ron Hartman and Mr. Jim Washington were interviewed at the FBI office in Colorado Springs. 2. Hartman and Washington state that Stevens Model 311D 12-gauge double-barrel shotgun by Savage, serial number A077513, was sold to an 18-year-old female on November 22nd, 1998. This 18-year-old female had just turned 18 a few weeks prior, and her age was confirmed by her Colorado driver's license. According to FBI Special Agent Keith Howland, Hartman and Washington were 100% sure the female was Robin Anderson, and the young man who accompanied her, they are 80% sure it was Dylan Klebold. That's curious. They couldn't positively identify Klebold. 3. The sale of the shotgun was conducted by Anderson, who paid for the firearm in cash, which she produced. No receipt was given, and when the shotgun was handed to Anderson, Klebold took the firearm himself. 4. An FBI 302 report of interview is attached with a full narrative of the events surrounding this firearm transaction. Washington is employed as a senior investigative and security specialist with Defense Security Service, DSS, 1935 Jamboree Suite 170, Colorado Springs. Washington has been with the DSS for 17 years and has a total of 26 years of service with the United States government. Hartman served 20 years in the armed forces, with his time split between the U.S. Navy between 57 and 61 and the U.S. Air Force between 61 and 77. Upon retirement from the Air Force, he became a civilian employee of the United States government, first at Fort Carson in Colorado Springs and then with the Defense Logistic Agency in Ogden, Utah. Due to downsizing on the part of the U.S. government, when the program he was assigned to in Utah was shut down, he retired from the government and is currently unemployed. So these are the two guys that she bought the gun from? A guy who works for the Defense Security Service? Interesting. Very, very interesting. All coincidental, probably. Now, if this was a covert op, does all of this make sense? If it's a covert op involving this occult activity and government agents and handlers, all of a sudden, everything kind of makes sense. That's why all these people are hovering around these teenagers. Government Patsy with another follow-up post here. The backgrounds of the dealers are highly provocative. Washington's nominal employer, the Defense Security Service, was one of the successors of the Defense Industrial Security Clearance Office. DISCO, that's a great name. Formerly the Defense Industrial Security Command, DISC. An obscure government agency tasked with conducting investigations of individuals whose work requires a security clearance. It's now known as the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. So these are the guys that Robin Anderson just happened to buy the gun from? Anybody else find that weird? Not to mention Mark Main's, Philip Duran, connections to Sedalia, which Brooks Brown, who many consider and insist maintain was not involved in anything, he just happens to also be in Sedalia, as well as Tad Bowles, one of the alleged founders, and Robin Anderson claiming that Chris Morris is the only official member of the National Trenchcoat Mafia. How would she know about that? And she's buying a gun from these government contractors of obscure government agencies that require high-level security clearances. Anybody else find this weird? Does anybody else find this weird? So the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, they do background checks on prospective defense employees, from tax and employment records to interviews with friends, family, neighbors, etc., to determine whether they are eligible for security clearance. Sometimes this extends to covert activity like surveillance of target individuals or planting a disco agent in a defense facility to pose as a subversive, to see if they can draw others out of the closet. There has been speculation that Lee Harvey Oswald was part of a disco operation, specifically in mid-63, when the reputed communist who had returned from the Soviet Union the previous year was inexplicably hired to work at a Dallas firm that did classified work for the U.S. Army. I mean, that's very curious. What do the coincidence theorists make of that? Their jurisdiction not only includes employees of the DoD and other government agencies, but also private contractors like Lockheed, Northrop, and Boeing. If an employee who already has a clearance is deemed a security threat, investigation of that individual similarly falls under this agency's purview. Naturally, this gives them a lot of power. They're essentially the internal security or police arm of the military-industrial complex, but how many people even know they exist? That's a good question, especially back in the 90s. In December 2004, the U.S. Army War College published a paper entitled Deception 101, Primer on Deception by Professor Joseph Cadell, U.S. Army War College External Research Program, from page 8 to 9. Quote, cover is the use of an apparently non-threatening activity to disguise preparation for or initiation of a hostile act. A common example is the use of a training exercise to hide preparations for an attack. If the training exercise was the last in a long series of training exercises, which had not led to actual hostile action in the past, this could also be an example of conditioning, hence the tendency to refer to conditioning and cover. The two concepts are linked by their complementary definitions. In recent years, both the Yom Kippur War of 1973 and the Falklands War of 1982 were launched under the cover of training exercises similar to exercises which had occurred before, end quote. Professor Cattle was a combat intelligence officer in the U.S. Air Force, 73 to 76, and has taught at the Defense Intelligence College, 77 to 93, Air War College, 83 to 89, Joint Military Intelligence Training Center, 93 to 97, and the National Intelligence University, where he has been a professor emeritus since 2014. So this guy clearly outlined what cover is and how training exercises are used. Now, does that sound familiar to any events that might have transpired in the years after Columbine, in the previous 20 years or so? Any of that sound familiar to anybody? And of course, at Columbine, all of these training exercises directly before the event. I mean, I guess the coincidence theorists are going to write all that off too. Research Columbine posted this: sometimes the drills are publicized as the actual event, where they need to stage an event rather than creating a false flag out of a real event. I suspect a recent infamous shooting, I'm not going to name the school because for some reason social media does not like anybody talking about this particular event, was a drill that the media portrayed as a real event. And I'm starting to think that that particular shooter wasn't even a real person, and they planted him, whoever was doing the typing, on forums to establish a history to make him seem legit. Recently, someone anonymous that nobody can identify happened to find this particular shooter's YouTube channel from way back then out of nowhere. I don't buy it if it really is the shooter's voice, but I don't buy that just somebody happened to find it after all these years. What have they accomplished since Columbine? That would be a good place to start to figure out why. Perhaps it was the foundation for the 2000s in furthering the gun control agenda. Now, here's an interesting quote from Sue Klebold. Now, a lot of people have mixed opinions on Sue Klebold, but here's an interesting article from February 13th, 2016 in The Guardian. Quote, before the meeting, Tom and I were still convinced that Dylan had either been a reluctant participant or accidentally become entangled in something bigger than he understood at the time. We heard a rumor that military training materials on brainwashing techniques had been found in Eric Harris's home, which had refueled our belief that Dylan had been another victim of the tragedy. It was plausible. Eric's father did have a military background, end quote. So apparently there were a bunch of meetings to re-educate the Klebolds about what exactly happened. But again, Mother's instinct here is stating that Mother and Father's instinct, they believed that Dylan had either been a reluctant participant or accidentally become entangled in something bigger than he understood at the time. Now, regarding Eric Harris, there are stories, I went over this in previous episodes, that because his father was at a military base in New York State where apparently Eric Harris was in the facility, and some allege that brainwashing began at that point. Also, apparently there was some handler, at least he claimed, Eric Harris mentioned that he had to go to some guy's house like once a week, possibly some kind of CIA or upper government agent for some reason. The coincidence theorists probably say that was some kind of counselor or something. Either way, highly suspicious without identifying exactly who that was. And John Quinn is the one who claims that there's evidence that Eric Harris was subjected to mind control experiments at Plattsburgh Air Force Base, tied to MK Ultra.